I received an invitation to a high school reunion. It's not a large-scale event. It's a reunion for our senior year class. I remember receiving an invitation about 4 years ago, but I couldn't make it due to scheduling conflicts. This time, I'm planning to make it work and attend. I'm already in my mid-30s. Even if they weren't my closest friends, it wouldn't be bad to catch up with the folks I spent my sensitive teenage years with after a long time. I took another look at the invitation. Seeing the name of the man who initiated and is organizing the class reunion, I remembered something. Back in my senior year of high school, Andy came to me almost in tears and said this: "Nathan, you are going to take over the family business, right?" "I don't want to." His family ran a church, and his father was a pastor. He was crying back then in our senior year, saying he didn't want to become a pastor. But it seems he ended up taking over the church after all. He must have become a respectable pastor after taking over from his father. Now I have one more reason to look forward to the reunion. Since I've already gone into detail, I might as well mention that I too took over my father's work. My dad is a family doctor. It's the so-called family doctor or town doctor. It's been almost 5 years since I joined my father's practice after working at a university hospital. My father is still actively continuing as the head of the practice. Old-time patients have always referred to my father as Dr. Senior Thompson and to me as Dr. Junior Thompson. About 30 people attended the reunion. Some had changed so much that I couldn't immediately recognize them, while others looked just as they did back in the day. Among them, Elizabeth caught my eye. In high school, she had a mature aura, yet when she laughed, her dimples made her the adorable Madonna of our class. Now, she seemed even more charming, possessing a youthfulness that could pass for someone in their 20s. "Nathan, it's been so long. I've wanted to see you." She initiated the conversation. Her saying she wanted to see me made my heart skip a beat. Seeing her smile directed at me gave me a jolt of excitement. It's an honor to be remembered, you know. We weren't that close in high school. She was popular with both boys and girls, a high flyer out of my reach. To her, I was probably just one of the many plain, unremarkable classmates. Though she might not remember, there's one unforgettable rainy day memory I have of her. Still, seeing her after so many years and being told she wanted to meet is perplexing. Even now, I'm just a plain, unremarkable local doctor on the surface. At the reunion, she was very popular, quickly surrounded by classmates happy to reunite. "Are you married yet?" "I'm still single." I heard someone say that. Realizing she might also be single, I stood there feeling somewhat pleased, but as more people joined the conversation, I found myself pushed out of the circle. It seemed like talking to her wasn't going to happen. So, I made up an excuse about wanting to hear some priest stories from the organizer and was about to leave the scene. Just then, she grabbed my arm and stopped me from leaving. "Nathan, it doesn't look like we'll have much time to talk today. Can we meet up soon? Just the two of us." "Just the two of us, I mean, sure." We hurriedly exchanged phone numbers. "I'll call you then," she said with a bright smile and returned to the lively group. I watched her, dazed. Being asked to meet up, just the two of us, left me bewildered. Yet, the invitation from the Madonna of my past left me in a dreamlike state. The next day, she got in contact with me right away. She mentioned she wanted to invite me to a sushi place she frequents. By invitation, she meant she would cover the costs. That would be imposing on you. Of course, I tried to decline. "It's no imposition, please, let me," she insisted with a sweet voice. "What's going on?" I couldn't help but be cautious about such a generous offer. "There's no such thing as a free lunch. I hadn't asked about her current job, but for all I knew, she could be in some kind of weird sales job, selling ridiculously expensive down quilts or something. "Nathan, you're a doctor, right?" "Yes, that's right." "I want to hear about it, so it's settled, right?" Whether she sensed my wariness or not, she pressed on with that sweet voice. "What kind of stories are you interested in?" When I asked again, puzzled, she said in a voice that was half teasing, half endearing, "That's for us to discuss when we meet." Zing. My heart was struck. It's uncertain whether it's true or not, but one often hears stories about men and women reuniting at reunions and sparks flying, leading to an unexpected romance. In that regard, there's no problem for me as I'm single and have no significant other. She said she wasn't married either. With these thoughts and filled with anticipation, I happily made my way to the sushi restaurant we agreed on. It had a modern design, resembling an upscale bar. Upon giving my name, I was escorted to a private room. She was already there, waiting for me. "Thank you for coming all this way today," she said, formally greeting me. Something about her demeanor felt off. "You must be busy, being a doctor and all." "Well, somewhat, yeah." She watched me sit down with a smile on her face. But her smile seemed more like a professional courtesy, somewhat distant. "Something feels off," I thought to myself. She rapidly fired questions at me, feeling increasingly uneasy about the clinic hours, days off, and my usual routine, among other daily activities. Indeed, she had mentioned over the phone that she wanted to hear about my life as a doctor. It didn't seem like she was trying to sell me a luxury down quilts, but still. "What's this about? Are you researching the lifestyle of a town doctor like me?" When I couldn't hold back and asked, she seemed to freeze up, tensing all over. "Is something wrong?" As I spoke, she slapped her forehead with the palm of her right hand. Then, she hastily pulled a business card from her bag, readjusted herself in her seat with a rustle, and presented the card to me with both hands. "I'm so sorry. I mistakenly thought I had already introduced myself at the reunion." I took her business card and glanced at it. She was a talent manager at an entertainment agency. She explained the situation with an apologetic tone. She managed a male talent in his late 20s. "He's got good looks and a nice personality. Kind of reminds me of you, Nathan." She flattered me as she began her story. The male talent wanted to focus mainly on acting in the entertainment industry. However, he had not been fortunate with the roles he received and had been somewhat lacking as an actor. Then, suddenly, he landed a leading role in a television drama. The role is of a young, handsome town doctor. That's why you were the first person who came to my mind. More compliment. In short, she wanted to conduct research for the talent's role preparation, and just then, the invitation to our class reunion arrived. As soon as she saw me, she blurted out how she wanted to meet me. Unbeknownst to me, I got carried away on my own. This was the gist of her story, but her flattery felt like a sales pitch at times. However, I figured she was just trying not to upset me, and let it slide. After all, she was just doing her job by approaching me. It was foolish of me to harbor any faint hopes. As I listened to her story, a question formed in my mind. It was about the TV drama where the talent she manages was cast in a leading role. Could it be? I'm so bad at this. I acted as if I had already told you about this and ended up asking all those impolite questions up front. After she finished explaining, she lightly tapped her head. Watching her do that, I found her slightly clumsy side rather endearing. And so, I decided to clarify my suspicion about the TV drama she mentioned her talent was starring in. "So, what's this TV drama about?" I asked casually, and she replied, "It's a late-night series, kind of a lighthearted mystery, I guess. Each episode is self-contained, spanning across 8 episodes in total. Each one lasts for 45 minutes. Each episode involved the young town doctor protagonist uncovering the mystery behind incidents occurring at a certain high school. There was no longer any doubt in my mind. There's an original work for it, right? I pretended to ask innocently. Yes, there is. It's a light novel genre. I wouldn't expect you to know about it, Nathan, since it's probably not your thing. If it was a light novel, then it was almost certainly the one I wrote. It turned out just as I had expected. I couldn't help but let a smile slip out. Then she took the original book out of her bag and held it up to me, saying, "The author, you see, has just recently made their debut." This newcomer novelist, who burst onto the light novel scene like a comet, was shrouded in mystery, with no public photos, age, or even gender disclosed. But I knew the true identity. It was me, inheriting my father's practice and working as a town doctor. The job of a doctor often involves long hours. Holidays are few and far between. Even outside of working hours, I can't relax because I might have to respond to emergencies or sudden changes in a patient's condition. There are also conferences and study groups to attend. But even doctors are human. Everyone is different. Some drink, some go out at night. In my case, my hobby during breaks was primarily munching on snack foods while reading. And it was always mystery novels. Being a private practitioner, as opposed to a hospital doctor, does allow for some flexibility in setting my own hours and taking days off, somewhat easing the long hours. Especially in my case, having my father around gave me significantly more free time than when I was working in a hospital. It was right after I switched from being a hospital doctor to join my father's clinic. I happened to read a mystery novel set in a medical environment. However, its plot was so far-fetched that I stopped reading midway. At the same time, I thought to myself, if something like this can be published, then I can write one too. The publisher of that book was holding a competition to discover new authors. With my newfound free time, I decided to take on the challenge of writing a mystery novel featuring a town doctor as the detective. I submitted my finished work to the competition. It didn't even get selected. However, later on, one of the judges from that competition, an editor, reached out to me. They said my writing and story structure needed work, but the medical aspects were realistic and good. They also found the setting of the main character as a town doctor interesting. Given that, I was invited by the editor to try my hand at a light novel he was planning. The idea was to use the town doctor from a story I had written as the detective in a high school mystery he was devising. The plan was to publish one story in a monthly magazine to gauge reader response, so over 6 months, I completed a work of about 80,000 words. This story was well received when published in the magazine, leading to a series and eventually a book publication. And now, that book was being turned into a TV drama. The show is a comedy with no gruesome incidents, where the recurring highlight is the protagonist, a town doctor, dramatically revealing a culprit with a "was you" moment. However, this is always interrupted by a call from an elderly patient, a childhood friend, asking for help with her unending diarrhea. As I absent-mindedly reflected on how I ended up juggling roles as both a town doctor and a novelist, she said, "That's why I'd like to hear more stories from you." "Sure, I can't promise I'll be of much help, though," I answered, pretending to be unaware. Maybe this was the moment to reveal that I was the mystery author behind the drama. However, I had kept the identity of the author hidden from the public and had missed the timing to reveal it in the conversation. Moreover, compared to the renowned author Mr. Thompson, she should find it easier to reach out to the town doctor, who was her high school classmate. Who knows, with these meetings, trust might grow and turn into something more, right? I calm my racing heart. I'm a doctor, after all. It's not uncommon for novels and comics to be adapted into movies or TV shows. Of course, the author's consent is necessary for such adaptations. The publishing company approached me about the drama adaptation. I was also shown a project proposal for the drama. In my book, I set the historical background to the time when I was in high school, but now it's been updated to the present. New elements, not found in the original, such as a young female teacher, have been introduced to add a romantic storyline with the protagonist, a town doctor. These were among the suggested changes. Whether novelists or manga artists, creators often have a deep attachment to their work and a unique worldview. That's why I've heard that some authors can be quite vocal and demanding when it comes to adaptations. However, being a newcomer, I believed that printed words and visuals are inherently different. So, as long as the drama didn't completely deviate from the essence of my book, I was open to letting them do as they pleased. The drama script was sent to me, but I merely skimmed through it without giving it much thought. Little did I know, I would end up getting involved like this. A week later, she reached out, wanting to give me an update. In return for the last time we went out for sushi, I met up with her under the condition that it would be my treat at a place I knew. Sorry for choosing a place like this, even though I said it was my treat. I took her to a local Chinese restaurant near my clinic. It was my favorite spot for lunch, but it was my first time there at night. It has a nice, old-fashioned vibe, doesn't it? Contrary to her words, the look on her face as she scanned the restaurant clearly showed her bewilderment. I guarantee you'll like the taste. I casually ordered a couple of drinks and a few dishes for us. The drama was still in the pre-filming stage, doing script readings and costume fittings. When I asked if things were going smoothly, she replied, "Well, it's going smoothly, but," indicating there was a discrepancy between the protagonist she had envisioned and the reality. The protagonist in the original is more straightforward and simple-minded, you know. She pondered over this as she started with the spicy Chinese-style cucumber dish. "Oh, this is good." She then reached for the bamboo shoots and roast pork on the table, repeating her praises with each bite. That part wasn't really changed in the script, was it? At my words, she looked up, puzzled. I let it slip. Now it's obvious that I've been reading the script. Well, I mean, that was a question. Isn't it like the original? Well, yes, but whether it was the talent she managed not getting the character right, or the director's guidance, she was clearly not satisfied. Stir-fried greens, wood ear mushrooms with eggs, and sweet and sour pork. We finished the meal with a mixed fried rice and left the restaurant. Thank you, it was delicious. It turned out to be just a regular dinner, didn't it? I remarked, but she shook her head. Talking to you, Nathan, I somehow feel better, thanks. A few days later, she contacted me to say that the filming had finally started. She was also present at the set. Though it was just the beginning and the final product was uncertain, she sighed, feeling that it still differed from her vision. But isn't it common for the protagonist to differ from the original in adaptations? While I'm not much of a drama buff, I am aware that it's not unusual for people to criticize casting decisions as being unsuitable or miscast. It's not just the protagonist, it's the overall tone. I wish it had more of the nostalgic feel like in the original. Her mention of nostalgic took me by surprise. I hadn't intended to infuse my book with nostalgia. However, I did reminisce about my high school days while writing. Perhaps she, having spent the same years at the same school, felt a connection and sensed nostalgia. But the setting of the drama is in the present, after all. Yeah, that's true. But how did you know? Once again, I had let something slip. It's just that I heard it from you. I blurted out an excuse in my panic. She asked back, "Did I tell you that?" I lied, "Yes, I heard about it." That day, my clinic was closed. It had been raining since morning, and I had been cooped up in my room at home, doing some research. She contacted me around noon, saying that the outdoor shooting was canceled due to the rain and she had some free time, so she suggested we have lunch together. How about that Chinese restaurant we went to last time? I had been there for lunch the day before, but I agreed and we met up at the restaurant. We bumped into each other in front of the restaurant by chance. We shook off the raindrops from our umbrellas at the entrance and then went inside to place them in the umbrella standard. After we ordered and were seated across from each other, she took a book out of her bag. It was the book I wrote. This is the original book for the drama, but I decided to reread it from the beginning. She said, showing me the cover of the book, "Aren't you in the middle of shooting? Shouldn't you be reading the script rather than the original book?" I picked up mighty. "That's true, but I noticed something interesting." She leaned in, her eyes sparkling with excitement. And then she said, "It's similar, just like our high school days." I almost choked on the tea I was drinking. The description of the high school in the book, from the main gate to the school building connected by a gently curving uphill path, with holly bushes planted on one side and 2 tennis courts on the other, as well as the layout of the school buildings and the bicycle parking area, was exactly like our alma mater. "Aren't most school layouts somewhat similar?" I replied, trying to maintain my composure despite my inner panic. "There's more." She went on to say with certainty that certain characters in the story resembled our classmates, and in another episode, there were characters similar to other people we knew. "If you think it's a lie, you should read it too, Nathan. I'll lend you the book." I took the book she offered and placed it next to me on the table, pretending to be uninterested. I thought it was time to change the subject. I looked around the restaurant for a new topic. My gaze stopped at the umbrella stand by the entrance. I had a bad feeling. And that feeling turned out to be right. In episode 6, there's an umbrella theft incident. She didn't need to tell me. I was the one who wrote it. I remember it clearly. On a rainy day, an umbrella is stolen from the stand at the entrance of the school building. The umbrella belonged to the class's idol. The town doctor detective takes on the case, identifying 3 suspects. Mala student A, who had a secret crush on the girl and wanted an excuse to be close to her. Female student B, who was jealous of the popular girl and looking for an opportunity to harass her. Mala student C, who had previously been a victim of a similar crime and wanted to take revenge by stealing umbrellas indiscriminately. The protagonist, a detective and town doctor, had been lying in wait near the umbrella stand before it was even known that an umbrella had been stolen. He approached a female student, asking, "Was your umbrella stolen?" and cleverly deduced that male student A, who had walked her home under a shared umbrella, was the thief. The boy's motive was just to share an umbrella with the girl he liked, even if it was just once. I was amazed at how such a story could be dramatized, as she mentioned, "Don't you remember, Nathan?" Her expression was different than before, somewhat innocently cheerful. "Back in high school, it wasn't that my umbrella was stolen, I just forgot to bring one despite the evening rain forecast." I thought she wouldn't remember, but she did recall that rainy day, unforgettable to me. I got held up doing something and ended up staying late. By then, everyone else from class had gone home, and it just so happened that only you were still around. I had fallen asleep in the library. When I woke up and went downstairs to leave, I found her stranded, unable to go home, staring at the pouring rain. I took my umbrella from the stand and offered to share it with her, who who seemed at a loss. "Is it okay?" she asked. And so, she and I shared an umbrella. Of course, this situation is entirely different from this book, but the description of the two of us sharing an umbrella, she said, peeking into my face. With a faint smile, she seemed to say with her eyes that she saw right through me. I admitted defeat. I give up. Yes, it's me. I'm indeed the author behind this book. I knew it. From that day on, we stayed in touch frequently, regardless of her work, and found time to meet whenever we could. You often hear stories about men and women reuniting at reunions and suddenly falling into a forbidden love. I always wondered if those stories were true or not, but it seems they might not be entirely unfounded. Though, in our case, it wasn't a forbidden but a rightful love. We need to buy a bigger one, don't we? I said, pulling her closer by the shoulder. This umbrella was too small for the two of us to fit under. I'll go talk to my brother, so you go buy me a coffee in the meantime. Understood. A man named Gary, who was in the midst of an affair with my wife Nancy at our house, claimed he was a mafia. I was taken to Gary's gang and, as ordered by Gary, I ran to buy coffee. However, as soon as I handed over the coffee, Gary's face twisted in anger. "You think you can get into our gang with this cheap coffee? Don't underestimate the Hawthorne gang, old man." I'm sorry. As I apologized, Gary threw it at me. Hearing Gary's loud voice, the gang members came out to see what was happening. As soon as they saw my face, they turned pale and started apologizing to me. "I'm really sorry, big brother. Our idiot has made a terrible mistake." Gary and Nancy were dumbfounded by the situation, not understanding what was happening. The executive stared sharply at Gary, who was dumbfounded, and began to explain. "My name is Tom. I'm a 43-year-old man who runs a restaurant. Though my life might not have been called normal up until now. I was told that my father passed away in an accident just after I was born, and I grew up living with just my mother. My mother was an optimistic woman who never lost her smile, always saying, 'Things will work out.' That life changed when I was in my third year of junior high. During class, I was informed that my mother had collapsed in the street. I rushed to the hospital, but was told she had had a stroke and wouldn't live much longer. Suddenly faced with this, my head went blank, and the doctors and nurses asked me for contact information for any family or relatives, but as far as I knew, there were none. I had been told that my parents eloped and got married after a grand love affair, and there were absolutely no relatives from either side of the family. I ended up alone in the hospital room, watching my mother pass away. With the help of adults around me, I managed to hold a funeral, but I was so overwhelmed that I couldn't even cry, and my consciousness began to fade. Losing my beloved mother, I wondered how I was going to live from then on. I had been studying to go to high school, but now I probably had to find a job. As I was still unable to grasp the reality of being all alone and hung my head, I heard someone's voice. Did my sister pass away? When I turned around, there stood a large, intimidating man. I wondered who he was, but then he showed a gentle smile and ruffled my hair. The strength in his big, warm palms shook not just my head but my heart as well. "My name is Tyler. Your mother, she was my sister. If you've got nowhere to go, how about coming to my place?" I had never heard of my mother having a brother, so I was utterly bewildered. However, after paying respects to my mother's portrait, my uncle muttered softly. In the end, I couldn't do anything for my sister. Seeing his profile, which resembled my mother's, I finally succumbed to exhaustion and fell into a deep sleep. From then on, I was taken care of by my uncle. Arriving at my uncle's house, I was surprised to find it was a luxurious mansion, complete with a pool and opulent chandeliers. I'm not a good man. That's why my sister left home and cut ties with us. I'll let you stay here for a while, but it's up to you to decide what you want to do." I couldn't agree with his words at all. How could a man who went to such lengths for me, a nephew he had just met, be anything but good? Seeing my expression, my uncle continued, "Listen, I'm a mafia. To the society, I'm nothing but a nuisance. If you don't like it here, you can leave any time. I'll provide for your living expenses, so don't worry." Despite his gruff words, he looked me straight in the eyes and spoke his mind. I wanted to believe in this man. "I want to stay here." "All right, I couldn't do much for my sister, but I'll take care of you until you're on your own." Later, I learned that my uncle and my mother's father, my grandfather, used to be the head of this gang. Growing up in a noisy household, my mother tirelessly protected my younger brother, almost like a second mother, always taking care of him. However, as my mother grew up, she became troubled by her status as the daughter of a gang leader and eloped with my father, who had no connections to that world. My grandfather was furious that my mother had run away and disowned her. But my uncle, who was close to his sister, secretly had people look for her afterward. My uncle knew where my mother and I were living a few years ago, but by that time, he had already become the head of the gang himself. He didn't want to show us that he had become the kind of gang leader my mother had hated enough to flee from. Upon learning of my mother's sudden death, he reached out to me, having watched over us from afar in silence until then. My uncle regretted not being able to speak to my mother in her final moments and made it up to me by treating me well. In return, I took good care of my uncle's son, Tony, who was 10 years younger than me and became like a cousin to me, and I chose to live in the world of the mafia. Tony grew very attached to me and looked up to me as if I were his real brother. However, one day, 10 years after living with my uncle, a conflict arose between the gangs, and as I was out with my uncle, mafia from a rival gang chased after us. While protecting my uncle, I was cornered on the edge of a cliff about 3 meters high. To protect my uncle from the men about to attack us, I instinctively jumped off the cliff holding him. I felt severe pain in my legs the moment we landed, but from the top of the cliff, only the surprised and fearful faces of our pursuers peeked down, and they did not follow us. Thus, I saved my uncle from danger, but my legs suffered critical injuries. Since my uncle is a mafia, we couldn't go to a regular hospital for treatment. "I'm sorry. It's my fault." "It's not your fault, Uncle. I'm just glad you're safe." In the end, I was left with after effects, and my legs no longer functioned properly. I have no trouble walking slowly, but standing for long periods or moving over long distances is challenging. Afterward, my uncle entrusted me with a restaurant under the gang's control, saying, "Perhaps my sister was right after all. Tom, from now on, live quietly away from us." Thus, I immersed myself in managing the restaurant, eventually expanding to several outlets. Before I knew it, about 20 years had passed, and I was leading a peaceful life. An incident disrupted my peaceful life. It all started when my wife brought a mafia member into our home. My wife Nancy is 8 years younger than me and was a regular customer who came to my restaurant every day for lunch. Given my leg condition, the restaurant was renovated to be barrier-free, eliminating steps at the entrance and inside. Nancy's first visit was when she was injured, and she was moved by the thoughtful design throughout the restaurant, becoming a fan of our place. Since then, even after her leg healed, Nancy continued to come for meals every day. Naturally, Nancy and I started talking, and I was gradually drawn to her bright and kind personality. Realizing Nancy felt the same way, we dated for 2 years before getting married. I did inform my uncle, but he only said, "As long as Tom is happy, that's all that matters." I wonder if, in my uncle's eyes, I no longer exist since I left the house. Honestly, it feels lonely. but I also thought it was time to stop relying on my uncle and start living on my own. I never told Nancy about my upbringing or past. So, I thought we would continue to live a life unrelated to the gang. With that in mind, our peaceful days passed by leisurely. Then, one day, an unexpected person visited my restaurant. "You look well, Tony. It's been a while." My uncle's son, Tony, had grown up in the 20 years, and now he was the gang's underboss. "It's been about 20 years since we last met. I have something I want to tell you today." With that preface, Tony shared something with me. "No way, I can't believe this." "It's up to you to decide what to do next. I'll be going now." I was too shocked by what I had just heard to move. But somehow, I managed to move my unsteady legs and see Tony off. Then, Tony showed a timid expression, like that of a small child. Even if you think that time will come, it's still scary when it does. "If anything happens, contact me immediately, Tony. You're important family to me." As I encouraged him with a pat on the shoulder, Tony regained his cheerfulness and left the restaurant with a bright smile. I was concerned about what Tony had told me, but I was soon faced with an even more pressing issue of my own. Nancy's attitude had gradually become colder. When we first got married, she used to prepare delicious meals every day and wait for me to come home. I was truly happy to be welcomed by her smile. But as half a year, then a year passed, Nancy began to neglect her household duties. Our conversations became perfunctory, and at times, she would ignore me completely when I spoke to her. She would leave meals and laundry undone, withdraw money from my account without permission, dress up flamboyantly like she was still single, and go out at all hours without any regard for day or night. Not knowing when she would return, I tried emailing her, but her address had been changed, and I couldn't reach her. When I tried calling her, it seemed like she had blocked my number. There wasn't even a ring, and we were completely out of touch. Since she would return late at night, our lifestyles became completely misaligned as I had to be up early for work. After living like strangers within our own home for about 3 months, I found staying in our empty, messy house unbearable and started coming home as late as possible. However, that day, there happened to be fewer customers, and I let the part-time staff go home early. Realizing there wouldn't be any more customers, I decided to head home earlier than usual. Upon opening the front door and seeing Nancy's high heels, I thought it was rare for her to be home. But at the same time, I noticed an unfamiliar pair of men's shoes next to hers, which made my heart start pounding. I broke out in a cold sweat, my body heated up, but strangely, my nerves became sharper. I immediately suspected infidelity, but I also considered the possibility that she might just have a friend over, so I decided not to go to the living room and instead headed upstairs to my room. But as I quietly entered the house, I heard Nancy and her companion talking loudly. I thought I married a rich man, but he turned out to be a total dud. But he's a boss, right? Owning several restaurants should be good enough. The person she was talking to was a man, and someone I didn't know. But his restaurants are just in this area, and so mediocre, it's disgusting how he limps when he walks. You are so much younger and prettier than him, Nancy. It's a waste to be with someone like that. Why don't you leave him? To the man's words, Nancy laughed heartily in response. But I hate working for a living now. I want to make my husband work while I have fun and live freely with you, Gary. As Nancy laughed out loud, the man named Gary also joined in with a coarse laugh. But you married him, so you must have liked him at some point, right? Stop joking. I never liked that shabby man. I thought he had money because he owned popular restaurants, so I was just a little nice to him, and he proposed on his own. Hearing Nancy's words, I felt a deep, cold weight in my chest. I had never imagined that Nancy thought of me in such a way, even though we had been together all this time. What a terrible woman. using your partner's wealth while cheating on him with me. I've been getting bored, so I've been completely ignoring him, waiting for him to bring up breaking up. I'm planning to squeeze as much money out of him as possible for alimony." This was the gist of Nancy and Gary's conversation. In other words, Nancy had planned this from the beginning, marrying me for my wealth. Shocked beyond words, I stood frozen at the entrance, listening to their cheerful conversation. But I couldn't just keep listening forever. Before I knew it, quite some time had passed since I entered the house. Feeling that I needed to settle this, I bravely stepped inside and flung open the living room door. "Hey, I need an explanation for this." This scene that unfolded before me was exactly what I had anticipated. Nancy was in the midst of an affair with a man named Gary. Surprised by my sudden appearance, Nancy just kept muttering in shock, "Huh, why are you here? How long have you been home?" While Nancy was visibly shaken, Gary, on the other hand, looked at me with a defiant smirk. Hey, you are supposed to knock before entering, man." With a smug grin plastered on his face, Gary casually moved away from Nancy. Seeing Gary's composed demeanor, Nancy seemed to be influenced by him as well. Forgetting her earlier panic, she calmly adjusted her hair and retorted with a defiant look, "What do you mean? It's exactly as you see. Is there a need for an explanation?" At their attitude, I felt even heavier in my heart. "So, it's true. You never really loved me from the start." "Love? Of course not. Why would someone young and cute like me get close to an old man like you?" She burst out laughing loudly. "Did you really think you were loved all this time? You must have been very happy in your delusion. I just wanted to marry a rich man because I didn't want to work." After saying that, Nancy deliberately snuggled up to Gary. "When I was looking for a suitable marriage partner, I found you, who looked like you could be easily deceived. You own several restaurants, and I thought I could ingratiate myself with you, especially since you have a physical disadvantage. Nancy here says so too. Stop deluding yourself that you were loved. Just pay up quietly and get lost." Interrupted by Gary, I couldn't hold back and retorted, "Why should I be the one to pay? It's obviously for the alimony. Apologize for the mental anguish you've caused by marrying a young and beautiful woman like Nancy." What they were saying was absurd. Nancy, acting as if it didn't concern her, leaned against Gary and twirled her hair. Unable to bear the sight of her, I muttered disdainfully, "The one who suffered mental anguish is me. I'll be the one demanding alimony from you too." "What did you say? Don't you dare talk back to me. I'm a mafia, from the Hawthorne Group, no less. We're a big deal around here." Gary advanced on me, his nostrils flaring with anger. However, I was taken aback by the name he mentioned. "Are you really from the Hawthorne Group?" "You doubt me. Don't mess with me. I'm Gary from the Hawthorne Group." Gary glared at me, grinding his teeth and putting force into his words. In the next moment, I pleaded with Gary, "Please, take me to your group." "Huh? You want to join our group?" Gary looked bewildered for a moment, then scoffed irritably. "An old man like you wanting to become a mafia now is just a nuisance. If you're really set on it, you should at least bring some money first." "I'll pay, but first, could you take me to the Hawthorne Group?" By this time, I had completely forgotten about Nancy. Knowing that Gary was a member of the Hawthorne Group, all I could think about was meeting the boss. As I kept insisting, Nancy murmured in disgust, "What's with this guy? So lame." But I couldn't care less about that. I'm not sure how much time passed as I continued to plead. Gary sighed in annoyance. "Fine, follow me right now." Saying that, Gary took Nancy and me to the car. In the car, Nancy mocked me multiple times. "You're in your 40s and want to become a mafia. You can't even walk properly. How could you be of any use?" But Nancy meant nothing to me now. Thinking simply that I would divorce her once everything was settled, I patiently waited to arrive at the group's location. "We're here. I'll go talk to my brother, so you go buy me a coffee in the meantime." "Understood." I left the large gate of the group's compound and quickly went around to buy coffee. Returning to the compound, I met Gary just as he was coming back to the entrance. As soon as I handed him the coffee, his face twisted in anger. "With this cheap coffee, you think you can join the group? Old man, don't underestimate the Hawthorne group." I'm sorry." As I apologized, Gary threw it at me. Then, perhaps hearing Gary's loud voice, other members of the group came out to see what was happening. "Hey Gary, what's all this commotion? This old man says he wants to join a group now, but he can't even buy a proper coffee, so I was just setting him straight." Hearing Gary's words, the member frowned slightly and looked at me. "You didn't have to make such a fuss. Have I seen you somewhere before?" The member who was scolding Gary peered into my face and started to ponder. Who could it be? Suddenly, the member shouted and turned pale, rushing back inside. He quickly returned, bringing with him a group of executives. They were all tough-looking men, and Nancy, as well as Gary, turned pale, wondering what was happening. "Gentlemen, what brings you all here together? How did you come to meet him?" With that shout, one of the executives grabbed Gary. The other executives turned pale and began to apologize to me. "We're terribly sorry, Big Brother Tom. Our idiot has caused you a great disrespect." "No, it's okay." Seeing me speak to the executives as equals, Gary turned red and started to rant. "It was this old man who asked me. He wanted to join a group, so I just brought him here. This man here, he's a legendary mafia. Without him, the Hawthorne group would have been long gone." Upon hearing the executive's words, both Gary and Nancy were dumbfounded and couldn't grasp the situation. The executive glared at the bewildered Gary and began to explain. "He, 20 years ago, risked his life to save our boss." This old man did. "What do you mean?" Finally changing his attitude towards me, I took the opportunity to explain further to Gary. "This is the home I grew up in. I used to be a mafia too. We became mafia after he had already left this house. It's an honor to see your face again after such a long time." The executive then spoke in a lowered voice. "Did you come today to meet the boss, by any chance?" "Yeah, Tony came to see me the other day and explained the situation, but my uncle didn't seem willing to let me in here, so I was in trouble. In fact, I had found out that my uncle had a heart condition and was given only 6 months to live. He was advised to undergo surgery, but the success rate was only 40%. Tony had told me this, and I wanted to see my uncle right away, but Tony shook his head and said that my uncle wanted me to grasp a normal happiness and never to re-enter the mafia life. My father always regretted what happened to you, Tom. He felt sorry and wanted you to live a happy life. Given this background, even if I had approached the group directly, I probably wouldn't have been allowed in due to my uncle's instructions." That's when Gary, who turned out to be an incidental adulterer from the Hawthorne group, appeared, and I fought to seek his cooperation. Upon learning everything, Gary trembled and began to apologize. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea about any of this. Please forgive me." As repeated apologies, so loud they might have grated the ground, seemed to annoy someone because more people came out from the back. It was Tony, the underboss himself. Seeing me, Tony's eyes widened in surprise. "Big Brother Tom, how did you get in here?" "By chance, I found someone willing to help." As the executives explained the situation to Tony, he raised his eyebrows in surprise. Big Brother Tom got cheated on, Well, guess this is my limit as a man." Tony frowned even more at my nonchalant laugh. "That's nonsense. There's no one more manly than you, Big Brother Tom. So, what will you do about that man? Before I could answer, one of the executives stepped forward. There's no need to bother the underboss with this. Gary will be expelled. He's tarnished the group's name, and he'll have to take full responsibility. With that, the executive took the now subdued Gary and disappeared somewhere. Then Nancy chimed in from the side. Desperately trying to charm me, she began to plead for forgiveness, doing her best to persuade me. I have nothing to do with this, right? It was just an affair, wasn't it? Affairs are unacceptable, mafia or not. Nancy shrank back at Tony's vehement anger, which caused a vein to bulge on his forehead. That's when I stepped forward, restraining Tony, and faced Nancy. If it was just an affair, maybe I would share some of the blame, but you've been scheming from before we even got married, haven't you? That is. She must have remembered admitting that she married me for my money. Nancy began to sweat and frantically looked around for an escape. But you also hid the fact that you came from a mafia background. That makes us even, doesn't it? Certainly, it was wrong of me to hide my past, but you were trying to deceive me for money. Isn't that much worse than hiding being a mafia? At my words, Nancy just hung her head and started to cry quietly, unable to respond. That's when Tony stepped in. You really did a number on Tom, didn't you? Don't think you'll get off easy for this. The calmness of his voice somehow made the silence even more pronounced. Ever since our uncle fell, Tony had been effectively running the organization internally as the de facto leader. Thus, Tony's words carried the weight of a leader's, and everyone obeyed. Take her away. At Tony's command, the members took Nancy away. I later received the divorce papers, but that was the last time I saw Nancy in person. I'll leave the rest to you. Leaving those words behind, I started walking towards my uncle's room. My uncle was lying in a large room, quietly closing his eyes. Uncle. Tom, I told you not to come. You're free now. You can live your life. Forget about me. Unable to bear hearing my uncle's stifled voice, I knelt down and grabbed his hand. The first day we met, he patted my head with his large, warm, and strong hand. Now, that same hand feels thin, cold, and considerably smaller. Uncle, you once said you regretted not meeting my mother before she passed away. That's... My uncle seemed to choke on his words, reminded of his own past statements. I gripped his hand tighter. I would surely regret it if I didn't come and see you. That's why I came. I'm living freely. You got me there. My uncle replied with a hearty laugh. And so, I decided to stay by my uncle's side, from his hospitalization through to surgery. On the day of the surgery, Tony and I went to encourage him, and the surgery was a success. Now, he's slowly regaining his lost strength and spending his days peacefully. Afterward, Gary was excommunicated and lost the right to use the organization's name. Without the ability to return to a normal life, he wandered from job to job until his funds ran dry. When he applied for welfare, it was denied due to strict laws against organized crime. Eventually, without any money left, he had to beg for loans from associates, and unable to pay the interest, he went bankrupt. As a result, he's apparently being made to do physical labor at sites related to the organization. He works to the point of exhaustion every day, gradually paying off his debt bit by bit. As for Nancy, it seems she was forced to work in a nightclub. Due to embezzlement from her affairs and the substantial debt she accrued for my alimony, she reportedly works tirelessly from morning till night without a day off, serving customers. Because of the exhaustion, she aged rapidly. Still in her 30s, she looks almost 50. Once her appearance deteriorated, she was relegated to cleaning, being worked to the bone. As for me, my uncle was finally discharged from the hospital, and we held a celebration at the organization. Having been away for 20 years, I could see how much my uncle had aged, and it brought a lump to my throat. Thank you for saving me. I'm truly grateful you took me in that day. Expressing my sincere gratitude, my uncle just nodded deeply without saying a word. He decided to pass the leadership to Tony, and he retired. For his retirement, he chose to help out at the restaurant I run. He always had a passion for coffee, and now he serves as a taciturn barista, offering delicious coffee to our customers. Sometimes, Tony visits the shop between his duties, and we compare coffees, enjoying satisfying moments. I plan to continue repaying the kindness my uncle showed me in the past and live peacefully.
What do you know, kid? Decisions like that should be made by president, and it's me. You should know who you are. Don't misunderstand your position. You should be fired, but there's a store that's short on staff, so it's convenient. Starting tomorrow, you'll be working there. Take this time to reflect on how you defied me. Mr. Todd decided on the spot to transfer me to a rural store after I directly negotiated with him over a certain matter. And at that new location, my beautiful boss Samantha faced a crisis. Who are you? Samantha, my beautiful boss, was shocked as I saved her dramatically. And from here, an unexpected life unfolded before us. My name is Shane. My parents both worked, but since I had many siblings, as the eldest son, I supported the family by delivering newspapers when I was in the middle school and working part-time at a local fast food chain when in the high school. After finishing my part-time job, I would study at home, take care of my younger siblings, and go to bed late at night. Despite the busy days, I never felt it was a burden. Wow! I overslept. On days I couldn't wake up on time and overslept, my parents and siblings would let me sleep just long enough to not be late for school. And they'd prepare breakfast and even my lunchbox. If we earned more, you wouldn't have to work so hard. I'm sorry, Shane. This is the least we can do to support you, but we really appreciate you. Thank you so much, Shane. Thanks, Shane. My mom and siblings expressed their gratitude for my help with the household, but I was the one who felt grateful. It was because of my warm family that I could work hard. And while it felt like an exaggeration to be praised for doing what was expected as the eldest son, I appreciated having my family every day. Thank you very much for hiring me. After graduating high school, I got a job at the fast food restaurant where I worked part-time. Because of my experience having worked since high school, I quickly got promoted to a manager. However, problems arose right after my promotion. Managing older staff was challenging. He's so cocky for someone younger. We don't have to follow his instructions, right? He's younger than us. If you're going to ask someone to do something, you should be older. He's still in his 20s. They made these remarks loudly enough for me to hear, but I pretended not to notice. I understood why they felt that way. Even though I had worked since high school, they probably still saw me as inexperienced. Being a manager didn't mean I should be complacent. I had to bear with it until I earned everyone's respect. Determined, I used their criticism as motivation to excel as a manager. If there's anything I'm lacking, please tell me directly. I'll do whatever it takes. Yikes. What's with you all of a sudden? Sometimes, I approached my older subordinates trying to find out what my issues were. They were known for their constant sarcasm at work and were called Snarky 3. Kyle was the leader. He was surrounded by Ken and Tyler. As I interacted with them, my shortcomings became apparent. So, I think it would be better if we did it this way. But you always do it that way, right? Kyle means that might be good for us, but not for the customers. Hey, you're just taking notes, but are you really listening to us? Of course, I'm listening. Even though you're part-timers, your advice is like that of experienced managers. It's very helpful. Thank you so much. Hey! Are you praising us or mocking us? At first, they were quite surprised by my proactive approach. But seeing me seriously taking notes and listening, they eventually stopped making sarcastic remarks. Initially, they seemed unapproachable, but I discovered that they were not as mean-spirited as others had said. They listened and gave good advice. Good management requires more than just my own efforts. Support from others is essential. As a manager, I couldn't mess up. Bridging the gap with employees and listening to their advice was crucial. I saw their realistic advice as a positive thing and managed the store by valuing both customers and staff, gradually increasing sales. A few years later, I was promoted to area manager at a young age. Even here, other area managers, jealous of my rapid promotion, tried to undermine me by hiding meeting materials, but I didn't give up. No, it's more accurate to say that I was able not to give up. Because. So, how did the meeting go? You're young, so you were probably targeted and harassed, right? It can't be helped. I'm still inexperienced. They're jealous and attack you because they don't understand your humility. Yeah, but even you were like that at first, Kyle. Can you really say that? Shut up. You guys were the ones who agreed with me, so don't act all high and mighty. Though the conversation veered off and they were just chatting with each other, the snarky three now supports me from behind the scenes. Which keeps me motivated. Thanks to these people, I could easily let go of the tough times. Even after becoming close with them, I didn't just favor them and listen to their suggestions out of bias. Their criticisms were realistic and helped improve the store, providing valuable insights. All I did as a manager was bring out their potential. I haven't yet been able to offer the kind of brilliant ideas and improvements they did. That's why I'm still inexperienced. To avoid just having a title, I need to keep learning from these people and grow. You were the only manager who listened to us. Really? Is that true? Yeah, it is. So, let's keep working hard for the store. Yes. Thank you for your support. You use formal language at work, but you don't have to during breaks. You're so dedicated and serious about your work, Shane. And so, over time, our relationship deepened beyond just manager and employees, becoming more like colleagues. However, one day, we never imagined that our bond and the efforts we put in would be taken away instantly. One day, Kyle was suddenly fired by the company. The reason was a fight with Mr. Todd during his store visit, leading to his immediate dismissal. Ken and Tyler, who stood up for Kyle, were also fired for the same reason. I couldn't process what had just happened, but before they left the store, I listened to Kyle and the others. Apparently, Mr. Todd looked down on them for being part-timers. But Kyle and the others provided excellent service to customers and worked as hard as full-time employees. Discriminating against them for being part-timers was wrong. Anger towards Mr. Todd welled up inside me. My body trembled with rage. Seeing me, Kyle remained calm, as if he understood. We each have our reasons for choosing part-time work. If that's denied, we can't stay here. That's too harsh. As your manager, it's my duty to protect you from unfair dismissal, even if it means opposing Mr. Todd. Shane. If you do that, you'll be fired too. I don't care. I said firmly. As a manager, I couldn't overlook my subordinates being unfairly dismissed. I will directly protest to Mr. Todd. With that, I immediately called Mr. Todd back to the meeting room and tried to convince him to take back Kyle and the others' dismissals. Do you plan to continue this method of firing part-timers based on personal preferences, keeping only yes-men around you? What do you know, kid? Decisions like that are made by me, the president. You should know who you are. Don't misunderstand your position as an area manager. Stunned by his harsh words, I lost my voice. Mr. Todd was completely unwilling to listen. You should be fired too, but there's a store that's short on staff, so it's convenient. Starting tomorrow, you'll be working there. Take this time to reflect on how you defied me. And so, because of my direct protest, I was transferred to a small, unpopular store as a regular employee. It was unbearable to think that this was Mr. Todd's way of not outright firing me. I lost my manager position that I had worked so hard to build, and I was assigned to work as a regular employee at the new location. I didn't regret standing up, but I couldn't protect Kyle and the others. I couldn't help but wish I had more power. When I told my family about the situation, they didn't blame me because it wasn't my fault. Even though my income would be lower than before, they were truly understanding and supportive. Feeling guilty yet incredibly grateful, I faced the next morning with resentment toward Mr. Todd and went to the store where I had been demoted. A woman who said she had been contacted by Mr. Todd welcomed me inside. Nice to meet you, Shane. I'm the manager, Samantha. Looking forward to working with you. Thank you. Nice to meet you too. At that store, the manager was a beautiful woman named Samantha. The staff at this store, where those demoted were gathered, were all unmotivated, but Samantha worked diligently. I wondered why Samantha had been demoted. She seemed to be well regarded and a great team leader, so why would someone like her be demoted? No, I shouldn't dwell on that. I should follow her example and work hard. I snapped back to reality, focused on my job, and returned to my duties. You're quite a fast worker. Seeing my work attitude, Samantha wondered why I was at this demotion store, but she had no way of knowing. As the busy days went by, Samantha began to speak to me more often. Here, this is for you. Thanks for your hard work today. Thank you, Samantha. I felt bad for always receiving things so often from you. You've been such a help at work recently. This is just a thank you, so don't worry about it. I do worry. So please, let me do the same back to you someday. You're so earnest, Shane. Then help me with my work again sometime. Of course, I'd be happy to. We complemented each other's weaknesses and worked together. Thus, we grew close as work partners and trusted each other. A few months later. One day, Samantha received a call from Mr. Todd. Gather 10 part-timers as opening staff by the end of the day. I'm counting on you, Samantha. 10 part-timers by the end of the day. Samantha answered Mr. Todd's call, and her voice rose in surprise. That was the unreasonable demand to gather 10 part-timers urgently by the end of the day for a new store opening in the area. Finding 10 part-timers in this area in a single day was an impossible task. Mr. Todd even threatened her with "You're fired if you can't do it." After ending the call, Samantha was at a loss, holding her head in her hands. It reminded me of the time when Kyle and the others were unfairly dismissed by Mr. Todd. I couldn't protect them and ended up getting demoted. Would I have to face the same frustration again, unable to protect anyone? No, I wouldn't let Mr. Todd have his way any longer. I came up with an idea. Samantha, leave his demand to me. Samantha looked surprised but believed in me, though she couldn't hide her anxiety as I left to recruit part-timers. But this was the perfect job for me. Regarding this matter, I felt it was almost a fated clash with Mr. Todd. I knew the time had finally come to settle it. Hours later, as the deadline approached, I returned to the store. Holding a stack of resumes, Samantha's already large eyes widened even more in astonishment. Shane. Who exactly are you? Her amazement was understandable. I had gathered all 10 opening staff resumes, meeting Mr. Todd's demand. But that wasn't all. Among the resumes were names like Kyle, Ken, and Tyler. The names of everyone I had worked with before were there. The gathered part-timers were all pros, having had similar experiences to mine. They had worked at my previous store but were unfairly dismissed by Mr. Todd after I was demoted. They all gathered because they said they wanted to help me. Thanks to them, I could save Samantha. I was really grateful. And among them was Snarky 3 as well. I never thought the day would come when I could work with you again. Kyle said, clearly pleased that I had called him, Ken, and Tyler back for part-time work. After Mr. Todd fired them, I helped them find their next part-time jobs and assisted with their resumes, so we kept in touch. They agreed to join his opening staff because they preferred to work in a familiar environment where they could use their knowledge from our previous store. Shane, these people are. Seeing the gathered part-timers, Samantha, still surprised, spoke up, and I, as if remembering, raised my voice and introduced them to her. Sorry, Samantha, I haven't introduced them yet. These are the part-timers who used to work with me at my previous store. Your previous store? You were a manager? Samantha was even more surprised. I thought I had mentioned it before, but it seemed I hadn't. As I struggled to explain the situation, Snarky 3 quickly started to speak. What's the deal, man? You didn't tell this beautiful Samantha about it? I guess you're not one to think about these things. Shane, I really like that about you. Is that a confession? Seriously, Shane, You didn't mention working with this beautiful Samantha before. No fair sneaking ahead. As Kyle, Ken, and Tyler pulled us into their playful banter, we all started laughing. Since work would start the next day, we wrapped up the introductions and job assignments and then called it a day. I was looking forward to working with everyone again, but as we were leaving, Samantha called me aside, saying she had something to discuss. We walked home together. And she began to speak seriously. Actually, I was demoted here because I directly confronted Mr. Todd, she began. According to her, Samantha was the type to confront Mr. Todd head-on if she disagreed. Mr. Todd wanted to reduce the use of fresh vegetables. But Samantha was objective to his idea, saying that would cause the reduce of customer satisfaction. That's why she was demoted. Even though she explained that fresh and tasty products were necessary to keep customers returning, Mr. Todd didn't listen. Samantha had also been a manager at her previous store, and hearing her story made me feel a surge of emotions. It seemed she felt the same, as tears welled up in her eyes when she recalled the past. But Samantha was a very strong woman. Seeing her wipe her tears and smile at me, I felt a deep admiration for her strength. As we continued talking, she started to enjoy the conversation more. So, you went through the same thing, Shane. No wonder you seemed more capable than the other staff. Appearances can be deceiving. You'll be even more surprised tomorrow. Kyle and the others are much more skilled than I am. You'll see. You're so humble, Shane. It's not easy to bring people together like that. You're young but very humble, just as Kyle said. Seeing the usually composed Samantha laugh softly gave her an unexpectedly innocent look. It made my heart skip a beat. Oh, she laughs like this. She's quite charming. Seeing her smile made my cheeks feel warm, but the cold night breeze helped cool me down. Knowing each other's backgrounds and realizing we were in similar situations made us feel closer. And without knowing that Mr. Todd had been planning to fire both of us at the same time. However, Samantha's successful submission of the 10 opening staff resumes didn't let him make it. Realizing that among the opening staff were those he had unjustly fired before, like Kyle. Mr. Todd must have felt humiliated in front of his yes-men. The next day, the new store smoothly opened with the experienced team working efficiently. Their excellent service and delivery earned praise from customers, boosting everyone's morale. In just a few months, the new store managed by Samantha became highly reputable, attracting more customers. She managed both stores, while I also flexibly worked between them, supporting the part-timers. Meanwhile, Mr. Todd, who didn't value his outspoken subordinates, continued to see a high turnover of talented staff, even years later. A few years later, Samantha, our team, and I finally resigned from a company that didn't value its customers or staff. Wow, quitting feels so liberating. This must be what it means to end on a high note. Samantha said, stretching beside me. Kyle and the others became a great asset, and although Samantha's store had excellent sales and reputation, we couldn't stand Mr. Todd's methods anymore. We resigned in preparation for a new project. But I'm so excited about the future. Let's share and talk about our ideas and plan together. Wait a minute. Don't forget about us. Snarky 3 leaned forward from behind me and said to her. She seemed very surprised, as if she had unconsciously been talking only to me. Oh. I didn't realize you all were here too. That's right. We just quit the company together, and you rely on Shane just because he was the manager. We were doing great too, Samantha. It's too harsh. Oh well, she did spend more time with Shane than with us. Still, she shouldn't just ignore our existence. Ken and Tyler, who both had feelings for Samantha, were quite shocked at being not noticed. On the other hand, Kyle seemed uninterested in Samantha. He was just watching me with amusement. Why did I feel like he could see right through me? To escape from Kyle's gaze, I cleared my throat and took over the conversation from Samantha. Anyway, let's work hard to establish our new competing company. When everyone responded to my rallying call, we all shouted, yeah. Yes, the plan was to establish a rival company. The next day, after quitting the company, we shared ideas, assigned roles, and worked on raising funds and gathering staff for the new company. We passionately presented our blueprint to the bank, securing loans, and invited those who had helped as opening staff to join us. Our ideal store would offer fresh and safe food for customers and a place where staff can develop their skills while valuing their individuality. During this time, we heard about the downfall of Mr. Todd's restaurant chain. One by one, the stores in the area closed. Even with multiple discount campaigns suggested by Mr. Todd's yes men, customers only came on discount days. The chain became known as a cheap and poor quality store, leading to its inevitable bankruptcy as Mr. Todd struggled with finances. Later, we heard that no banks would lend to Mr. Todd, and his restaurant chain finally went bankrupt. Did you hear? Mr. Todd's company went bankrupt. Apparently, he's working a manual labor job now. He looked down on us for being part-timers, and now he's the one working as a part-timer. It's ironic. Kyle and the others talked about his downfall. The backstory was that even his yes men had all handed in their resignation letters at the last moment. They had only been acting to please Mr. Todd and resigned once the company was on the verge of bankrupt. Without anyone left to support him, there was no choice but close the company. Some of the yes men, regretting their past loyalty to Mr. Todd, even begged to work for our company to do better themselves. Samantha and I decided to accept them through interviews. Yes, everyone should be treated equally and have their individuality respected. If someone is in need and wants to improve themselves, I want to help them. I want to cooperate wherever I can. Just like my family, Kyle, and Samantha have done for me. I realized once again how fortunate I was to have such supportive people around me. Without them, I don't know where I would have been ended up. I was able to grow, thanks to everyone's support. And with this clean break from Mr. Todd, I felt a refreshing sense of freedom. A few years passed, and we steadily expanded the restaurant chain we had envisioned. Samantha, I have something to tell you. What's this all of a sudden? What do you want to talk about? While Samantha had been my partner in business, over time I had developed feelings for her and decided to confess. I felt strangely nervous. Not being used to this, I even felt a bit of pressure. After all, she was the beautiful boss everyone admired. How pathetic to feel this way after bringing it up myself. Noticing my unusual tension, Samantha laughed softly and began to reminisce. Come to think of it, since you joined my store, it's been one surprise after another. But it's because of you, Shane, that we could create the company we dreamed of. Thank you for guiding us. Expressing her gratitude with a smile, Samantha looked more beautiful than ever to me. And with newfound courage, I finally opened my mouth to convey my feelings. I couldn't have come this far without your support. Thank you for sticking with me. So, if you're willing, I'd like you to be my partner not just at work, but also in private life. I extended my hand to Samantha. My heart was pounding, wondering if she would take my hand, but Samantha looked at me with a joyful expression. Yes. I'd be happy to, she said, taking my hand. We officially started dating as partners both at work and for private. Look at you two, so in love. With Shane, there's no doubt she'll be happy. Shane, make sure you make our Samantha happy. Snarky 3 suddenly appeared, congratulating us, and Ken and Tyler chimed in with their usual banter. Samantha and I looked at each other and laughed. They were not making snarky comments anymore. I was truly grateful. Being blessed by them and receiving their advice and support was essential for me. Of course, I take full responsibility for making Samantha happy. And having overcome work challenges together, I believe we can face anything as a couple. What I can't do alone, we can accomplish together, no matter what. You're embarrassing to be around. Get out, you loser. Olivia had always been harsh since we got married, but this time she went too far. I clenched my fists in frustration. You can't say things like that. I'm not a loser. Then my son, David, spoke with a look of disdain. I've never acknowledged you as my dad. You're a disgrace to this family. It was a shocking statement. I packed my things into a small suitcase and prepared to leave the house. Just then, my daughter, Emily, rushed out from the hallway. Dad, I'm coming with you. I don't like Mom at all. A warm feeling welled up inside me, and I took Emily's hand. Mom called me a loser, but actually, I make $30 million a year. Emily seemed to think it was a joke and laughed brightly. So, Emily and I took a train and arrived at a luxury residential area. As Emily looked around in confusion, we stopped in front of an especially large mansion. My name is Benjamin. I'm a 52-year-old caregiver. I've been working in this job for almost 10 years now. Being a caregiver is tough, but it's a rewarding job. I truly believe that switching to this career was the right decision. I used to work as an accountant at a small firm. The company was a real grind, and I was working late at night every day. Just as I started questioning if this was the life I wanted, my mother, who lived alone in the countryside, fell ill. She needed a wheelchair and required constant care. Having lost my father when I was young, my mother was my only family. I left my own family behind and moved back to my hometown to care for her. I've never regretted quitting my job. I had heard that finding a new job would be tough after leaving the workforce for caregiving. But I was determined to cherish my last days with my mother. The reality of caregiving is far from easy. Helping with the bathroom and baths, cooking soft meals, assisting with eating, each day was consumed by these tasks. She wouldn't sleep well at night, leaving me sleep deprived. Watching my mother regress to a childlike state was heartbreaking. If this were child rearing, the child would grow and become more capable. But with elderly care, no matter how much care you provide, their abilities diminish, and the hardship increases. Had I tried to handle it all alone, I might have despaired at life. What saved me was a nearby care facility. I used every service they offered, like day service, short stays, and home visits. The caregivers treated my mother so well, and I can't express how much they saved us. After my mother passed away, I was hit with a devastating sense of emptiness. Seeing my state, Emma, my mother's care manager, made a suggestion. Benjamin, why don't you consider working in caregiving? People like you are needed in this field. Could I really help? I know caregiving needs more hands. If I can help other families like mine, I'd love to do it. So, I returned home from the countryside and started working as a caregiver. The only ones who never understood caregiving were my family. I married Olivia 10 years ago. At that time, I was still an office worker, making good money with all the overtime. We met at a matchmaking party for people in their 40s. Olivia had been married before, and her son, David, was 10 at the time. I had always been single and had a strong desire for a family. Olivia often tearfully recounted how she had struggled as a single mother since David was born. Unable to secure a permanent position at work, she bounced from one temporary job to another, struggling to make ends meet. She was a bit chubby, but that added to her charm. She had a warm smile that seemed to embrace everything. Benjamin, you always wear such worn-out clothes. Why don't we go shopping together sometime? I'll help you pick out some outfits. That sounds great. I don't often buy new clothes because I feel like I can still wear the ones I have. At the time, I thought Olivia was just making an excuse for us to go on a date. We met at the station and went around various clothing stores, buying clothes and accessories. I looked pretty stylish by the end of it, but I also ended up spending a lot. She even took me to a fancy hair salon where I had my hair cut, permed and dyed. When they said, all done, my hair in the mirror showed no noticeable changes, making me wonder what, if anything, had been effective. I later found out that the salon owner was a friend of Olivia's. She took me there to help support the business. Looking back, I might have been a bit desperate. As things with Olivia got better, I thought this might be my only chance in life. They say love makes you less rational, and that's exactly what happened. Olivia seemed more beautiful than ever. David was a cheeky kid even back then, but I saw it as youthful energy. However, he never showed me any respect. Still, I thought things would change once we became a family, so I proposed to Olivia, and we got married. My mother, who was healthy at the time, was overjoyed that I finally got married. But Olivia, who had always liked flashy things, started spending money recklessly and eventually quit her job without consulting me. I'm quitting my job because I'm only getting temp positions and it doesn't pay well. I want to be a full-time housewife and focus on raising our child. Our daughter was born shortly after we got married, and we named her Emily. I finally felt like we had become a real family. Emily was a sweet child and very attached to me. I worked harder than ever, to the point where it affected my health. I felt numbness all over my body and had bouts of dizziness. I managed to get by each day, pushing through the discomfort. Then my mother's caregiving began, and I returned to my hometown alone. To my surprise, the numbness and dizziness disappeared completely when I was away from my family. After caring for my mother until she passed away, I returned home to find David in college and Emily in 5th grade. While Olivia and David had been living lavishly, spending my savings. When I got home, Emily came running to me. "Dad, welcome back. You must be tired." "Thanks, Emily. Where are your mom and David?" "They went out for drinks. They knew you were coming home today." Emily was the only one who welcomed me back. Olivia and David didn't appreciate my 5 years of caregiving at all. After my mother's caregiving, I became more frugal. Even if people mocked my shabby clothes, I didn't care. Olivia and her son cost a lot, and my caregiver's salary wasn't as high as before. So, I had to be frugal to manage. I also wanted to save for the future. Everyone will need care someday. When that time comes, money is what matters most, as I've learned from experience. My mother managed to be cared for at home, but there are limits to family caregiving. If one needs to enter a nursing facility, it costs a lot. It's best if the person can cover it with their pension, but we don't live in an era with ample pension funds. In that case, you'll need to dip into your savings to ensure you get the care you need until the end. This way, you won't burden your family, which I believe is the best option. That's why I work at the care facility every day. The facility I work at mainly offers day service and short stays. Day service involves spending time with the users from morning until evening, engaging in recreational activities. During this time, their families are relieved from caregiving duties and can enjoy a moment of peace. Short stays allow users to stay at the facility for a few days. Like day service, this provides caregivers with some free time to refresh both body and mind. Every morning, I ride my bike to the nursing facility, change into my uniform, and start my work. There, I formed a special bond with Sophia, who uses the day service 3 times a week. I call Sophia Mom. On the other hand, Sophia calls me Benjamin. Sophia is a very intelligent elderly woman, but she has poor legs and uses a wheelchair. I dedicate the feelings of unfinished business from my own mother's care to Sophia. Sophia lives in a mansion and recently made the whole house barrier-free. Seeing wealthy seniors like her reinforces the importance of money in the end. Sophia completely trusts me and often tells others, "My son takes good care of me." "Benjamin, I'd like to get some fresh air. Could you push my wheelchair?" "Of course, Mom. The weather is nice, let's go out to the garden." Our natural interaction brings smiles from my colleagues. One day, I discovered my checking account, used for living expenses, was empty when I updated my passbook. It was the middle of the month, with a long way to go until my next paycheck. I immediately took out the savings passbook and confronted Olivia. "What is this? Why is the account empty?" "It's only the middle of the month." When I glared at her, expecting an excuse, Olivia brazenly responded. "You say it's for living expenses, but it's never enough. There are other savings, but this is the only account I can access." "Of course. It's empty. I've put in enough for the 3 of us to live on." "You're spending too much. You expect me to wear ragged clothes like you? Besides, being with you is embarrassing. Get out, you loser." Olivia had always had a sharp tongue since we got married, but calling the only breadwinner a loser was too much. This time, she had gone too far. I clenched my fists in frustration and managed to speak. "You can't talk like that. I'm not a loser. I'm working hard as a husband and father." Then David spoke with a look of disdain. "I've never acknowledged you as my dad. You're a disgrace to this family." It was a shocking statement. From there, it turned into an endless dispute. We unleashed all our pent-up frustrations and started arguing. "Do you think we can live without my income? It's heartbreaking that my hard work only earns these words. You earning money is a given. I've been taking care of the house and the kids. But do you know how humiliating it was to walk beside you? Just like David said, you were an embarrassment." I was momentarily speechless. I never imagined she felt that way about being with me. "Fine. I'll leave. But don't regret it later. Even if we divorce, I'm keeping this house. It's compensation for 10 years of living in poverty. Though I said I would leave, I hadn't mentioned divorce, but Olivia brought up compensation. She must have been thinking about divorce for a while. With things like this, we can't continue living together. We've been married for 10 years, but for 5 of those years, I was away caring for my mother. Back then, our household was divided, and I sent extra living expenses, thinking it would help. Maybe that was a mistake. The account Olivia managed was always empty by the end of the month, but I assumed it was because David and Emily's education costs were high. But to David, I was just an embarrassing father. So there's no point in staying together. If I leave, divorce will naturally follow. What was our marriage for? If I hadn't married Olivia, would I have married someone else? Maybe that woman would have cared for my mother with me. But it's all my responsibility. I chose Olivia and decided on this life. I silently stood up and packed my things into a small suitcase in the bedroom. There was a knock, and Emily peeked in. "Dad, what are you going to do now?" "Mom and David don't want me here, so I'm leaving." "But this is your home, isn't it?" Hearing Emily's voice nearly brought me to tears. I patted her on the head and said, "Take care," before heading down the stairs. I walked out the front door, intending to head to the main street. Just then, Emily, with her school bag on, came running after me. "Dad, I'm coming with you." "I don't like Mom." A warm feeling surged in my chest, and I took Emily's hand. I wasn't alone. The warmth from Emily's hand melted my troubled heart. We walked side by side towards the nearest station. Emily seemed a bit nervous. Maybe she was worried about our future. To reassure her, I revealed the truth I had been keeping. Mom called me a loser, but actually, I make $30 million a year. "No way, Dad. You're just an ordinary person. And I know caregivers don't make that much." Emily seemed to think I was joking. Without saying more, we got on the train and arrived at a luxury residential area. Emily was bewildered as we stopped in front of an especially large mansion. I rang the doorbell and gave my name, and Sophia's voice responded. "You have the spare key, don't you? Come on in." While Emily looked puzzled, I took out the key from my pocket and opened the door. Sophia greeted us, wheeling herself in her wheelchair. "I'm sorry for the sudden visit. It seems my wife and I are getting a divorce." "I see. But now we can move forward with the adoption plans." I quickly introduced Emily to Sophia. Sophia smiled warmly and greeted her. "Nice to meet you, Emily." Emily still looked confused, but we went into the spacious living room since it wasn't a conversation for the entrance. Emily was astonished by the luxurious furnishings and the room size. "Are we going to live here?" "Why?" "I'm going to be adopted by Sophia. For that, I needed your mom's consent." "If I became Sophia's son while still married, your mom would have likely spent Sophia's assets. So that's why you couldn't be adopted until now." I quietly said, "Exactly." "Emily, is it okay if you have to change schools to commute from here?" Sophia asked. "That's fine. I'm good at making friends quickly," Emily replied confidently. "How wonderful. From now on, I'll be your grandmother. If you need anything, just let me know. We're going to keep this house as it is and build a care facility on the remaining land." Sophia is an intelligent woman who inherited vast lands and considerable assets from her parents. She once told me she had lived a relatively easy life, never marrying and having no other family. As she approached the end of her life, she thought about what she could do and came up with the idea of turning her home into a care facility. Since it would be difficult to do alone, she first talked to me about it. "I won't always be as healthy as I am now. Having a facility at home would be very reassuring. Benjamin, would you help me with my dream?" Sophia had already spoken with contractors and planned to build facilities on her other properties, ultimately creating a significant social welfare corporation. This corporation is the one with an annual revenue of $30 million, and Sophia has entrusted me with full authority. I took action immediately. First, I stopped all bank transactions and changed my card numbers to cut ties with Olivia. The next day, Olivia called me multiple times. "I can't withdraw any money. What are we supposed to do about living expenses? Now that you've cut ties with the loser, you should be able to live more luxuriously. I want a divorce. Emily wants to stay with me. We'll also handle the property division properly. Olivia readily agreed when I offered to give her the house as part of the property division. Since Emily often took my side, she might have been a nuisance to Olivia. Olivia easily agreed to let me have custody of Emily. As part of the property division, I decided to give Olivia the house she currently lives in with David. The other bank accounts were kept in my name. When I sent the divorce petition, Olivia signed and returned them. I handed over the petition at the court, officially becoming a single man. Now, Olivia and David, who I never adopted, are just strangers. I formally adopted Sophia, resolving to take care of her until the end. Care facilities will be more necessary in the future. Someday, I will go from caregiver to care receiver too. Though I don't want to think about it, it's an inevitable path. To ensure I receive proper care with a solid system, I must prepare now. Our new life began with me, Sophia, and Emily. Emily got to use a room on the second floor of the spacious mansion. Sophia had already arranged for a luxurious carpet, lovely colored curtains, a beautiful bed, and an expensive study desk. It feels like a dream. When I decided to come with you, I thought we'd end up in a tiny, bathless apartment. But now I feel like the main character of a storybook. Knowing Emily followed me with such resolve deepened my affection for her. Emily called Sophia grandma and helped her with various things. Sophia, moved by Emily's kindness, often shed tears of joy. I chose a life without marriage, thinking I'd never have grandchildren, but having such a lovely granddaughter now is the greatest happiness. I'm happy to have a grandma too. I never lived with my grandma, so I couldn't do anything for her. But now I can be kind to my new grandma. Seeing me involved in caregiving, Emily decided she wanted to follow the same path. While it was a joyous thought, knowing the hardships of the caregiving field, I also worried about her future. So, I always talked openly about both the good and bad sides of caregiving. In reality, the job is physically demanding and pays less compared to other professions. Many people mistake caregiving for volunteer or service work and treat caregivers disrespectfully. I'm glad you want to be a caregiver. But remember, it's not always a job where you're appreciated. There's night work, and the pay is low. Make sure you know the good and the bad before deciding. Honestly, I hesitate to rely on Emily for my care. The 5 years of caring for my mother left a lasting impression. Ideally, I'd like to stay healthy and pass away without needing care, but who knows what lies ahead. I plan to extend my healthy years by paying attention to my diet and exercising regularly. Once we settled into our new life, Olivia tried to contact us again. Apparently, she was struggling financially after the divorce. Meanwhile, I had become Sophia's adopted son and stood to inherit her substantial wealth. Isn't it unfair? You never told me about someone like Sophia. If I'd known, I wouldn't have agreed to the divorce. I figured you'd try to get your hands on Sophia's money, which is why I insisted on the divorce. I'm sorry I called you a loser. Can't we live together again? I'll change and be good to you. The idea of Olivia being good to me seemed like a joke. I decided to decline politely. Sorry, but I'm not interested. You should focus on finding someone new now that you're free. I'm asking you despite the shame because there's no one else like you. Didn't David say I was an embarrassment? To avoid more shame, let's end these calls too. I then blocked Olivia's number. I learned about Olivia and David's situation through Emily. Since Olivia is her biological mother, Emily occasionally met with her. From what I heard, both Olivia and David were in dire straits. Olivia had spent all her savings and decided to sell the house I'd given her to make ends meet. She moved into a small apartment with David and focused on finding a new partner. However, in her age group, many men were looking for women who could help them when they needed care in the future. Mom was angry, saying, "No way. I didn't get married to clean up after someone else's messes." I wonder why she doesn't consider working herself. Even if Olivia couldn't work for some reason, David, who is now an adult, should be able to. However, after graduating from college, David didn't get a job. I was surprised to learn that he had gotten into gambling during his college years, to the point where it affected his studies. Thanks to the efforts of college staff, he managed to graduate. But he didn't want a full-time job because it would interfere with his gambling, so he lived doing day labor jobs. Thinking back to the days when he lived with his father, I felt both exasperated and sad. A year has passed since then. Sophia and I finally came to our dream of opening a care facility. The facility was named New Leaves. It's a newborn facility, but we plan to expand it and provide care for as many elderly people as possible. New Leaves offers both day services and a nursing home for seniors who can no longer live independently. As the director, I am busy every day. Though not always fun, the days are fulfilling. In this era where people live to be 100 years old, it is important for us to support and help each other. Spring arrived, bringing the beautiful blooming season. I pushed Sophia's wheelchair, and we enjoyed the flowers together. Sophia remains lively and actively supports the recreational activities at the facility. Most of the residents don't know that Sophia is the owner of the facility. I want to live on the same level as the other residents. If they know I'm the owner, they might hesitate to befriend me. I agree with Sophia's approach. What I wish for now is for Sophia's healthy days to continue as long as possible. Mom, please live a long life. I want you to attend Emily's wedding as her grandmother. I'm looking forward to that. It's probably a long way off, so I need to keep going. I see a big tree in front of me. A gust of wind blew, scattering a shower of blossoms. While enjoying the beautiful sight, I want to continue spending joyful times with the other residents.